All right. We are super lucky today to have Izzy Moore on the podcast. Izzy is a researcher that you may have seen if you've, looked into the postpartum running literature, and if even before that, if you were looking at female athlete literature, you probably saw her name come up. So we're excited to have you on the podcast this morning. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, Carrie. It's really appreciate the invite to come and talk with you today about postpartum return to running. I'm an associate professor at Cardiff Metropolitan University, and as you say, I started with female running in my PhD, then moved to a bit of kind of sport medicine and epidemiology, and have now come back to the female athlete. So it's great to be part of this emerging research field.
Yes, we have been hungry for it because, as you all know, the postpartum literature to begin with isn't great, and then obviously you throw athletes into it, and it really was the desert out there. What sort of drew you over from just basic female athlete to now being a bit more involved in postpartum literature?
Really, I have a phrase that I often use in a lot of my equality work, which is be the change you want to see. And I recently got promoted and took a couple of days off, which is probably not what you're meant to do after being promoted. I'm going to hit the ground running. I took a couple of days off to kind of sit back and go, I really love research, but I wasn't really loving what I was doing at that moment in time. And took the decision to basically not work with certain people anymore, not those kind of, there weren't that great collaborations, let's just put it that
Mm.
way. Close those doors, finish those projects as soon as possible, and start something different, something that I think I could contribute to in a really meaningful way. And a few months earlier, I'd seen Grania and Emma present, and I must have come across that the return to run clinical guidelines that they put together with Tom Goom, and just fired off an email. And I guess the rest is history to some degree in that capacity. We kind of got together, and I think I've put together some really interesting research, both from having good quality to it, but also some clinical, meaningful work. So yeah, it was really, I was kind of at this crossroads of wanting to do something meaningful and thinking that I could contribute to that research field.
Yeah. For when the first time you kind of took a look at, the return to run guidelines that Emma and Grania and Tom kind of pulled together, and just understanding how little there was as far as postpartum research, like, was that a challenge for you, or you're like, oh my gosh, this is the desert as far as information goes? Like, what did you think?
I wasn't hugely surprised because I was currently running our sport medicine master's program, and I'd reviewed all of the content of that program and also who we had lecturing on that program. And we had about 3% of the lecturers were female, and we had 1 hour on the female athlete
Mm,
across the whole program. So I'm glad to say that when I left that post after 2 years, we had a 50-50 split in kind of men, women teaching,
mhm.
and a lot more kind of just female content, just, in the imagery. Obviously, it just comes when you actually have more women lecturing, you
Yes.
get a bit more of the content. So I was aware that there wasn't really much. And for me as a researcher, that's great because it just means, well, I mean, anything we do
Right.
is,
It's going to be a big deal.
it's going to be a good step, and we can build from it. So it does mean that funding is harder because
Yeah.
you're just going, well, there's nothing, so I want to do something, and that's not that attractive funding wise. So a lot of it is off your own back, trying to build a bit of something
Yeah.
to be able to then get that funding. So that there's that kind of issue to deal with, but it really is okay. So what cool stuff shall we do? Because we can do
Do
basically we can
anything.
take it in
Yeah.
any direction we want. So I think it was quite exciting to be able to do that, but it does mean you because it means you have to pull parallels from other fields. So
Yes.
the injury literature and the sport medicine kind of world, because you can't just build it up from a postpartum body of evidence.
Yeah. No, I was so excited when that came out in 2019 because a lot of us, I think, in clinic who have done sports orthopedic as well as pelvic health, were because there was nothing, we're pulling from the stuff that we knew. And I say we bastardize it, but like we're basically trying to morph it and play and see if there's anything there. And because there's really no other option. So what else are you going to do? So it was so nice to see that collectively, like, hey, this is kind of what we've got to have a starting point, and kind of move forward. Like as you've been kind of, working with this, like because there's so many options of things to talk about, like what's been your favorite part of dealing with that postpartum kind of focus? What's been the favorite part for you? Like what's gotten your interest?
From a research perspective,
Yeah.
I think actually, even though I'm a biomechanist by trade, and then I went into epidemiology and I've done a bit of physiology, actually being able to go, let's consider the whole person. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's normal, because in most of sports science, it's not normal. And in sport medicine, it's not normal. We might do a psychology thing, or we might do a biomechanics thing,
Yeah.
but those people don't tend to talk to each other that much.
Right.
My PhD actually was interdisciplinary, and I was kind of a bit of the loner during my
Ah.
PhD, because they didn't really know how to handle that, and it was really down to me. I had supervisors in each discipline,
Oh,
and
interesting.
I was the person kind of mashing it together.
You were Switzerland. You were bringing everybody together.
Exactly. So I enjoy that side of it. And then this kind of allowed me to almost go back to that as well, and
Yeah.
working. So I know you've had Megan James on the
Yeah.
podcast, fantastic PhD student, and her PhD really has that mix in it. We've got a psychologist supervisor, a physical activity and health expert, a biomechanist in myself. We've got clinician Gonya Donnelly. So we've got that real mix going on to go. At the centre of this, there is a human. It's not just
Yes.
someone who has mechanics or a mind. It's everything thrown in together.
That and I think you literally just put in a nutshell why I love working in the pelvic health postpartum space, because you really have to pull from everything. Um, and you get to come up with something new and unique for that person in front of you. And that's where I think the creativity comes in, the critical thinking, like, okay, maybe I need more on, mechanical, but I've got to pull in some hormone things, and then psych because they used to be a collegiate athlete. So we've got to deal with mindset. And it's this lovely problem that needs to be worked through. And then you've got to pull in a coaching aspect to figure out how to implement this in the context of the fact that they've got we were just talking about a full-time job that if you're in the States, you went back to at 4 months postpartum, plus a couple other kids, plus, plus, plus. I love pulling that all together because it's messy and you get to play and you don't know how it's going to turn out, but you're going to impact somebody in such a big way. And now you being a mom, you've got a 10-month-old son. Did I get that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
about 10 months.
Um, so how is that played into this? So what's your favorite part now, being a mom and kind of looking at this, not as a researcher, but as a mom that this may impact, other moms? How does that kind of play in?
Probably firstly, I'd say the people that say sleep while the baby sleeps have never had a baby,
I agree.
especially when the baby only wants to sleep on you. Because
That was my oldest.
so that'd be my first thing.
Mhm.
And I think I I can only really speak of the healthcare system in the
Sure.
UK. It it's not good enough for the postpartum women, but particularly if you do want to do exercise and sport, it's you just
Yeah.
don't get anything. You don't get any routine care
Right.
afterwards that is really good enough. If you have a cesarean section, as normal is nothing. There's no
Yeah.
physio. Major abdominal surgery, and it does just go back to, if this was a male condition, we would have for sure.
I would agree.
And the fact that so many women on a daily basis go through all of this and just get on with it. And I think that's probably one of the harder things with postpartum research is mums just get on with things.
Yeah.
I've got a few mum groups, and the stuff that they go through is incredible. And then their partner gets, a sniffle and a cold and is written off for a couple of days. Meanwhile, they're still having to get up in the night and breastfeed and do all of those things.
Mhm.
And I don't think if you read research papers, you can ever appreciate that side of things.
Yeah.
The sheer enormity of the task of being a mum and being everything else around it. And then I think as a researcher going, can you come to my lab for 3 hours? It's
No,
just not
no,
going
I
to work.
can't.
So it's given me a good perspective from that side as well.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have some more, we call it street credibility here. Do you feel like you have more street cred now that you're that you're a mom?
Well, I've got the bags to show for it under my eyes,
Yeah.
probably. And every lurgy going for the past like 10 months. So I have that side of it. I'm not sure I'd ever have any street cred, but I think certainly it gives you a good perspective
Yeah.
of what you're asking from your women. And I think it
Yeah.
makes me realise as well, when we did our first survey, and we had a massive response. Unfortunately, we had over 1,400,
Wow.
but we couldn't even use them all because they didn't fit the criteria, maybe of being like
Right.
2 years postpartum or when but people were just craving to be able to give this
Yes.
information, and some of the things that they were willing to just share, uh, even before I was pregnant and postpartum, is almost sometimes heartbreaking. Some of the stories that they would just be putting in a survey, and you kind of realize they never really had this outlet or researchers going, we want to help you and we want to figure things out for you. And I think I've never really seen that with other populations that I've dealt with before,
Yeah.
even just female runners in general, but certainly in male athletes, they're just like, oh, whatever. Whereas the postpartum population was so giving and willing
Yeah.
to want to have their voices heard.
No, I agree. I think it's so unique because moms are that, everything you just said, like we're just going to suck it up and do it. But if somebody asks and really truly wants to know what's going on, we'll share. And that's, I mean, it's got to be heartbreaking, but also a treasure trove for you because it's all these ideas of, oh my gosh, we could look at this and we could look at this, and it probably is almost overwhelming to figure out, okay, well, how do we figure out what's the most important? So if you and I hadn't put this in the question, but just the papers that had come through for the Journal of Women's Health Physical Therapy, like the questions that you asked in these surveys, like, do you mind just giving like a quick overview of like, this is the basic stuff that we wanted to know, but now kind of some of this other stuff, this is kind of what we're looking towards, and where there might be more questions.
Yeah, so in those specifically as well, they weren't even the real main focus
Yeah.
of our research, because our research was very much quantitative.
Right.
And can I, as a quantitative researcher, put some variables in and try and find factors that contribute to return to running? And then we realized we did ask a load of other things, and there's so much richness and detail in them. And Meg, who led one of those papers, Meg James, PhD student, did a fantastic job of synthesizing all of that information, which was around what kind of concerns did
Yeah.
you have about returning to running, or running during your pregnancy as well. So it was a very broad, open-ended question. And in the paper that Gwanya led, it was about kind of the guidance that they had and what did they wish they wanted.
Yeah.
And so Meg, as part of her PhD, is exploring the kind of barriers in a lot more detail to go, well, how can we maybe do something about that? So is it because they don't know, which was one of the common findings?
Right.
I don't know how to return because I'm not getting that information.
Right.
Okay, well, then we can maybe do something about that and put some resources together, and certainly do an intervention to help look at how to return. Other things are around pelvic floor dysfunction, which was quite common. And again, it's about understanding, well, are you being signposted to the right healthcare? Do you even know that there are healthcare professionals
Right.
called pelvic health physios? Do you know to go to the GP and ask about this information? So Meg's doing a lot more in-depth work now off the back of that,
Yeah.
to help inform that return to run program that she's looking into.
Yeah. No, it's interesting when we talk about, what do you wish you had known, to go see or who to talk to or that sort of thing. And I work with moms that their kids might be a little bit older. They might be, anywhere between, 5 to 10 years old. And they still have those regrets from 5, 10 years ago. And I mentioned, my kids are 9 and 12. If I think back, like return to anything, there was nothing. We were still, you know, don't do all these things because of diastasis recti and it's a bad and awful thing. Only, do pelvic floor muscle contractions with pelvic organ prolapse and stress urinary incontinence. And like, I don't know that there was, you went and you ran. There wasn't any sort of, maybe you should talk to a pelvic floor physical therapist during pregnancy. Maybe you should, schedule that visit before you. There was none of those conversations that I think, you know, eh, with the return to run guidelines in 19, and I think, an increase in social media, people having conversations. And I think COVID lended itself to this too, because, more people were just running because those were the options. Um, we didn't have any of that information then. It wasn't a conversation that we had. There really wasn't any research. And so I always, pause with people and say, please don't have those regrets because it wasn't even a thing. And even, I talked to somebody earlier today that her oldest is 4. She's like, oh, I should have done this and this. I'm like, that wasn't a thing. We didn't do any of that. And even, when I see clients in between their pregnancies, I love if I haven't seen them in 4 years because I can think, okay, well, back then we were treating things this way, and now like I'm seeing a lot of like muscle overactivity with pelvic organ prolapse, and I wouldn't have, even have thought of that 2-3 years ago. And so I just love that the conversation people are being open with, this is what we're going through, this is what, and you guys are listening and being like, all right, well, what do we need to look for next? But I think it's so important to delineate how quickly, and it's also, I think, coincided with so many more pro athletes returning to high level sport. And I think you've kind of delved into this a little bit with these high performing pro athletes and postpartum and those sorts of things. Like, what are your thoughts as far as like, where we need to go with research as far as that goes?
So interesting you talk about COVID, is because that's actually, we began all of this research in a
Yeah.
COVID world. So
Right.
the beginning in terms of reaching out and speaking with Grania and Emma was all done remotely
Right.
in this lockdown period. And as you say, it's the field has just kind of almost exploded with postpartum research. And I mean, I have to hold my hands up and say that's not. I'm lucky to put my names on a lot of these papers, but it's more the work ethic of Grania, who
I
is
know.
fantastic
Talk about
ideas as
super
well.
mom.
Super mum and researcher and clinician. I mean,
Yeah.
she does it all and has great ideas, and being able to come with that clinical background and ask the difficult questions, and why don't we have this in research?
Right.
And the editorial that she led on, which is about return to sport
Yeah.
for athletes.
Yeah.
We're not talking about our sedentary people. I remember I get told, oh, you can go and you can do the hoovering, and I'm like, I mean, I don't do that. I'm a very bad housewife. I didn't do that before. Didn't do that before I was postpartum. I'm not going to do it as the thing I do now I have a baby. I will, however, go in the gym and try and lift some weights. So,
Right.
I like you say, it's we now have a shift. We're seeing athletes come back,
Yes.
and hopefully that also just infiltrates a bit just normal mums, and that mums want to exercise and do sport,
Right.
not just go up and downstairs and do more movement around the house.
Yeah.
But that editorial, I think, is a real marker for that population,
Yeah.
particularly it can go for all populations, but particularly the athletic one, and hopefully it will provide a kind of first step for other sports to think, okay, well, what guidance are we giving? Because most of them have none. We have guidance on concussion protocols,
Yeah.
although let's maybe not go to them into too much detail because it don't always get put in a positive light, but there are protocols for concussion. We know that kind of hamstring, ACL, some of those common ones, there's not necessarily as much formal guidance from governing bodies, but there's certainly a real feel for how to do that
Yeah.
rehabilitation that gets put out there. So I would like to see governing bodies looking more at, well, what guidance can we put together and how can we work
Yeah.
with the researchers, such as myself and others in that space, and clinicians to do it well. Because let's be honest, particularly in the women's game, you're not necessarily going to get an expert in postpartum care
Right.
or have had many athletes go through it. So I think there's a real space there that needs the governing bodies to also think about
Yeah.
how they can help the medical teams as well as the athletes.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up a really good point. There's always an assumption, I think, with just laymen, that if you are in professional sport or high level sport, that you have access to the best information. And I mean, I don't think that's true in female sport at all. I think, we get whatever's, left over if it's a pro sports team. If it's, anything where there's no money, you're not getting anything. And there was such a fight for so long to even, get back to pro sport, after having a baby. So it really is this perfect culmination of um, demanding more resources. And I think the other shift too, and I have this conversation with women a lot. I'm in the generation, I don't know if your mom was like this. Um, my mom initially would work out. She was that generation that you would work out to lose weight, or you would exercise for that. It was more of a body image, lose weight sort of thing. And growing up, doing sports, you would see that, but then you got to choose, were you going to continue to work out and exercise? And you had these two experiences. You did it as a sport that you enjoy, but then you also saw this in your household. And then now, what are you going to do with this when you have children and when you have daughters? What are you going to teach them? And we really are the sandwich generation that, we're realizing that return to sport is our identities. It helped define us as kids, and we want our kids to find that. And, we want to feel healthy, and we know the medical benefits and all that stuff. And so, again, I feel like it's such this perfect culmination of, it's a great time to have some of this research come through and ask these questions and, find these baselines and find the guidance that you're talking about. So, I mean, do you remember your mom exercising growing up, or?
No, she did dancing. That was her thing.
Okay.
Like dancing. But no, she didn't do a lot of exercise. My dad had to stop football young because of a back injury.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really me. I was a footballer at heart until I had injuries.
Yeah.
um, and now I do more running and the gym
Yeah.
type work. But yeah, I think you're right. It comes down to those role models as well, and
Yeah.
actually a lot of the conversations you have with postpartum mums. I mean, if you have any, I mean, I had nothing throughout my whole pregnancy or postpartum about exercise or even just general physical activity.
Wow.
I think you have like one question of, are you physically active?
Right.
Yes.
What does that mean? Right.
And certainly nothing specific or beyond that. So I
Yeah.
think if you can't get it from your mum or whoever, our healthcare providers definitely need, something we've seen in the research as well, that
Yeah.
only a third get that kind of
Right.
guidance
Right.
or just some general guidance. And it's 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity during pregnancy and postpartum, but I'm not a huge fan of this kind of 150 minutes seems to be the thing that we just tell everyone to do regardless, right?
Right. Like, what does that mean? What does that look like? I mean, I can't even translate that into hours. The math is,
Yeah.
like, tell me what to do. I don't have enough brain cells to.
Yeah, and it's not, if you're a runner, that you're like, okay, but I run, maybe you
Right.
run 3 times a week, like that doesn't
How does that
fit. What
fit?
am I meant to be
Right.
doing? And there's some good research actually that came out last year about very high level runners, pregnant
Yeah.
runners, and into the postpartum period, and they continue to run throughout their pregnancy,
Mhm.
doing between 2 or 3 times the amount of activity that the general guidance is.
Mhm.
But they did decrease the amount of running they did, but they just supplemented it with
Yeah.
maybe cross training. So their actual total volume didn't change from pre-pregnancy to throughout their pregnancy.
Yeah.
And it's those they're high level athletes, but
Yeah.
I think we are moving away from this notion of fragility of the
Yes.
pregnant woman and the postpartum woman, which is, I mean, obviously, these are uncomplicated pregnancies,
Right.
but I think the more that we can actually have that kind of positive message around exercise and sport,
Yeah.
the better.
I agree. So when you're in your mom's groups and topics like this come up, are you biting your tongue or are you diving right in, or like what questions come up, or what conversation pieces come up in your mom's groups?
Well, I guess the one that I'm close to, they know a bit of my background, so normally
Okay.
they will direct some questions towards
You're
me
not
asking.
incognito.
No, yeah, they're like, oh, this is great. It's just free advice. We had one of the mums ran a half marathon at, what was she, 6, 7 months
Oh, wow.
postpartum, and she was just like, "Do you think I can do it?" I was like, "Yeah, we feel like you can." She's like, "I've just gone for a few runs," and she walked so much
Yeah.
during the first few months. And I was like, "Well, yeah, if you feel, able." I
Yeah.
mean, the worst that can happen is you just have to stop, but you tried.
Right. Right.
So yeah, so she did that, and some of them are lifting weights, and
Mhm.
but it has made me more realize, for a lot of them, it's the time and energy.
Yes.
Uh, and you can't magic a difference in that so much. If your partner has to work long hours,
Right.
if you're breastfeeding and doing still several night feeds,
Yep.
all those factors
Yeah.
kind of contribute. And it's all very well saying do 150 minutes of activity, but I'll be there weeks. Some weeks I'm like, no.
No, yeah, no, totally, totally. No, that's a really good point. I mean, one of the things that I think, um, after I became a mom, I realized was so important on the clinical side was just to understand the logistics, is to understand, okay, what did you come from? Where do you wanna go? Is your like, how are we on sleep? How are we on nutrition? How are you doing, mental health wise? And then literally by the minute, what does your day look like? And then we do a lot with habit stacking and figuring out how to put stuff in, because I very distinctly remember things needed. I felt like things, if I couldn't do it perfectly, if I couldn't have that 25 minutes, I would do nothing at all. And it took my son like a half hour to go down for like a 20-minute disaster nap, and and then you spin around in circles, and then before you know it, they're awake again, and you do not see that ending. And so sitting down with a mom and, like 2 exercises in 2 minutes, that's where we start.
Yeah,
That's where we
yeah,
start. And that is, or if you're dealing with like SPD or leakage or things like that, like I don't want you to rest. We still need to do some of these other things, but we've got to figure out the manageable bites
yeah.
so that you can do it, because it's those little things that are gonna add up. But I think especially first time around, you think everything has to be a certain way, and then you realize that there's not enough hours in the day.
Yeah, well, because I'm having a rest week this week from
Mhm.
the program I'm kind of loosely following in my own head, and it means that I actually have like done a lot more tidying and sorting around the house, because normally I will exercise in its first nap of the day, because it
Mm.
tends to be quite routine now. Is at the age
Oh,
where
that's good.
I know I've got at least an hour, and a
Yeah.
good time, an hour and a half, so I can do a session, and then it's done, and then I can eat as much chocolate throughout the day, whatever's needed to get through
Exactly,
the
to
rest
get
of
through
the
the
day.
day, yeah.
Then, but certainly, when you don't have that consistency
Yeah,
of downtime,
yeah,
and then you realize how much you need to cram into your downtime. Okay, so I need to put my feet up. I need a cup of tea. I need
yeah,
to switch off. I need to actually maybe respond to some messages that friends keep trying to contact me, or I need to ring my mum, or I need to
yeah.
exercise, or I need to go shopping, or whatever it like. There's almost a bigger to-do list in your downtime than in
Yes.
your time your time with the baby. So that's something, again, I don't think I ever really appreciated.
Yes.
Well, you wouldn't, or you even really know about, is my downtime to-do list is massive.
Yeah. No, I
um,
I I totally agree. No, but I think understanding that when you're working with that population is gold, because I remember, and I apologize to any client I ever treated before I had kids. Like, I remember thinking, if somebody came in and told me that they couldn't get to 3 exercises, I'm like, "Well, you're just gonna have to figure it out." And now I will sit with them and say, "Okay, what is one thing you absolutely have to do? Okay, you gotta go walk the dog. Okay, as soon as you come back in from walking the dog, you're gonna go to that spot, you're gonna do those 2 things, and then you're gonna go on. Like, it's gonna take you 2 minutes, it's brainless, you set it up." And now I'm like, "Let me help you figure this out, because I know what it feels like to be spinning and have the huge to-do list during your downtime." But I think that gives moms just a way forward, because you see these things like, I want to get to a half marathon. I want to do all these other things. I know I can do it, but I feel like the logistics, sometimes the barriers. So that goes back to Megan's stuff. I guess we have more work for Megan then.
oh yeah, we can keep giving her work.
All
She's
right. I
next.
like it. I like it. So, but no, I love the fact that I always think it's so interesting when people get into postpartum work, um, and don't have kids. And I didn't, and I didn't kill anybody, which is good. But I feel like I have such a greater appreciation for the challenges and the variables and that kind of stuff, because it's quite unique, having to navigate that. For you, kind of, looking forward, you're getting back into your research, and academia will come next fall for you. But like, what are you looking ahead now that you've got, a couple of toes in the water here for postpartum? What questions do you want to take a look at?
Firstly, I actually have to close a number of projects, because I sat
Oh,
down. That's one of the things I have done, is sat down and gone through all of the projects that I'm part of, and I've gone, "No, that's absolutely unmanageable." So
close the doors.
I need to close things first. I've actually been fortunate, even on my maternity leave, for about 3 different opportunities arise for some really interesting projects, postpartum related. So
Mm,
one in cycling, and a couple in running, and actually more as a more mentorship and kind of contributory position. So I
that's
kind of
great.
take, I'm happy to do that at the moment then, and drive with Megan's research, which, to be honest, she's doing it
Yeah,
herself, which
she's
is even
great.
it's even better. And kind of go with that for the next couple of years. And also, Gwen is going to be taking on a PhD. So I've got, I think, those
That's
projects
enough.
is
That is
enough.
enough.
And I haven't been able to come up with any research questions in 10 months. Is probably you can say that's the state of my sleep.
You're going to build the brain cells back. They'll come, I promise. There might be a
I hope.
45-second delay on remembering things, but it will come back.
Yeah. So I'm hoping phasing back into work is really
Yeah.
just to kind of blow the cobwebs off.
I love
And
it. No,
yeah,
but I mean, I love the fact, that you're supporting, Megan and her stuff moving forward. And, we've had Megan on. And then Grania, we connected, oh my gosh, probably in the beginning of like a little bit before, but then when the pandemic, she and I chatted, and then we were supposed to talk before the holidays, but we're connecting back again, and just how far that stuff has come. I love the fact that they're just these lovely voices and great minds are just kind of, I'm so excited and motivated and just like incredibly hopeful, because I feel like the train has definitely left the station and the momentum is so strong towards making change and having research to support it, which helps us in the clinic. So whoever you're supporting, even if those ideas aren't coming just yet, like we appreciate you.
oh,
We
thank you.
appreciate you.
I really enjoy working in this field more than I have in a lot of fields that I've contributed to. It's, as you kind of mentioned, there's some great players involved, Meg, Grania, driving things forward, and it's such
Yeah.
a supportive and
Yes.
collaborative group, which should be the way
Yeah.
research is done, that mix with clinicians and students, but isn't always done in such a supportive way. So for
Yeah.
me, it's really refreshing, and it's why I've got really my mojo back with research. Like I said at the beginning, I kind of took that break at 2 years, and it wasn't really in a good place at all. And now, we have a great vibe going on with the meetings that we're pulling this postpartum research together in, and that's from my perspective really exciting. So it's
Yeah.
great that clinically it's having an impact,
Yeah.
meaningful, and you guys really want more of it.
Yes, we do. Tell us how we can help. So do you have any, any studies you need subjects for? What do you need? We will help.
Actually, but I think by the time this comes out, Meg will probably be getting closer to actually running an intervention with her work, or
Yep.
certainly soon. So actually, that would be the one to look out for, because that's going to be the first ever, I think, intervention, like us really looking at how do we get people back to that stage of
Yes.
running and being able to tolerate that load mentally and physically. So I'm really excited about that project, but we know the
Yeah.
recruitment for those type of things tends to be a bit harder than a survey. So
Yeah.
yeah, watch out for that coming through.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. And you live over on Twitter. I wish you'd come over to Instagram. It's nicer over there. Who knows
Yeah.
how long Twitter's going to be alive? But
Yeah.
if you want to see any more from Izzy and her research, she does. They usually post, calls for subjects and that sort of thing. You can find her over on Twitter at Izzy Moore PhD. Thank you so very much for the work that you do. I'm so happy to hear that postpartum and working with physios and that kind of stuff is a happy, warm, welcoming spot for you, because we will take every brilliant mind that we can get. And again, speaking for all clinicians that are in this space, we could not be happier to see you guys churning this stuff out. So thanks again for all you do, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for those kind and lovely words, and I really enjoyed this interview, and hopefully people find it interesting. And like I say, if you guys have any interesting research ideas that pop into your head, or really keen to collaborate and do research, always welcome to take those kind of emails. They're the ones I like seeing.
Good. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thank you.